All right, guys, we're going to try this one more time. And the only reason why I'm putting in the effort, especially for this video specifically, is because the Blue Jays won Game 7 last night. Let's go! Holy shit, that was intense, man. So I'm super happy, super motivated. Living in Toronto, fighting the good fight for AI adoption in Canada has been really hard, but seeing Toronto Blue Jays win like that, I'll continue with this dry and technical conversation with you guys. If you don't recognize me yet, my name is Alex. I run an AI agency in Toronto called Peak Demand Incorporated. We help small, medium enterprise businesses with AI adoption, as well as municipalities and transit systems. And a big topic of conversation that's come up recently, only because AI is getting popular, is the idea of digital sovereignty in Canada. So we're going to listen to a podcast. I hate podcasts, to be honest. I'm not a fan of just listening to people talk. I like watching what people do and then doing it. But we're going to listen to some of the words that these Globe and Mail journalists have to say about sovereignty in Canada. And you guys are going to quickly learn that this idea, it's an idea. It's literally just the concept of sovereignty digitally in Canada is only becoming something people are paying attention to now. Meanwhile, Canada strictly lacks the digital infrastructure, both physically and digitally, to have our own sovereignty when it comes to us storing data in Canada, not letting anyone else see it. We gave up on that opportunity 30 years ago when the rest of the world blasted past us with tech economies. We don't have a tech economy here in Canada. If we do, it's very fledgling, borderline runt. And so you're going to hear these journalists try and figure out what sovereignty means for Canada now, knowing that we don't have anywhere near the capacity for data management in this country as the States does. And our government is literally trying to put together regulation on managing our data now. So really interesting time in Canada. Just because we really we're so far behind, we're literally having to race to catch up, and business leaders, lawmakers are trying to figure it out as best they can. But meanwhile, we don't have 30 years of experience in the space, so we're literally outsourcing our sovereignty to international partners, which in and of itself is extremely ironic. So let's get into it. I'm going to try my best, to interrupt when I want to. I think I need to explain something about what they're saying, but I'll let you guys listen to most of it.
It's something we've been hearing a lot about ever since U.S. President Donald Trump took office. It's about protecting our natural resources and manufacturing sectors, but it extends to all parts of our economy. In early September, 70 public figures, including Margaret Atwood and Adrienne Clarkson, wrote to the Prime Minister, urging him to defend Canada's digital sovereignty. To that end, Prime Minister Mark Carney has asked the Major Projects Office to build a, quote, sovereign cloud. And the government is currently asking for public input on the project. But what does digital sovereignty mean exactly? Today, Globe business reporter Joe Castaldo and innovation reporter Pippa Norman are on the show. They'll tell us why digital sovereignty is such a hot issue, what progress Canada has made in building it out, and if it's even possible to have sovereignty over the digital space in a globally connected world. I'm Cheryl Sutherland, and this is The Decibel from the Globe and Mail.
Just a heads up. I really don't like podcasts. I don't like listening to the scratchy voices coming through my headphones. It's annoying. It's cringy. Like how people put that little twang on their voice. I don't like it. But I think the conversation is necessary, so I'm going to tank it. I might, including a transcript, getting a transcript for this monster conversation. I'm going to try and have at least like a little synopsis in the description for you guys below the video that I put up here reacting to it, so you can get a quick gist. But let's take a listen.
Joe, Pippa, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.
So, Joe, we've been hearing a lot about Canadian sovereignty ever since Donald Trump took office, but we've been focusing mainly on physical products and infrastructure projects, not so much tech. So can you tell me about what we mean when we say digital sovereignty? Like, what are we talking about?
Well, we're talking about physical infrastructure too, in one way. So the infrastructure behind artificial intelligence and cloud computing. So basically data centers and the stuff inside data centers. So having that Canadian owned and Canadian operated is one aspect of it. And then this gets more nebulous, but like the data itself and ensuring that sensitive data is subject only to the laws of Canada as opposed to another country. That's it in a nutshell. It gets more complicated from there because you have foreign companies that operate in this space saying that like they too can offer Canada sovereign solutions.
So we want to pay a little bit of attention here. The point he's making is we have entities that do not fall under the jurisdiction of Canadian law proposing an infrastructure to Canada that would be sovereign. Now, this is and this is like, well, how does that make sense? And that if you're thinking that, you're absolutely right. We're now at a point where the world leaders, government leaders, the leaders of countries are quite literally trying to figure out. They don't know what to do. They're trying to figure out how Canadians can achieve digital sovereignty while leveraging systems that don't belong to Canada. And that thought, that concept or idea in and of itself is a paradox. You're not sovereign if you're using international systems to manage your digital infrastructure. It doesn't work. So Canada is at a point now where we can't advance technologically without the Googles, Microsofts, Amazons of the world. Yet at the same time, Canadians are crying foul. Oh, what's going on with their data? The US is going to have our data. The US already has your data. If you use Facebook, Instagram, Microsoft, Google, you're already tagged and bagged. Thousands of data points on you are already swimming through their systems. So this idea of digital sovereignty is more rooted in ego. I really do believe it's rooted in ego and feelings. There's nothing. I mean, we want to talk about safety for data and what that means and the implications for our citizens. The U.S. already has all of us. If you have a Facebook account, Instagram account, Microsoft account, if you use Google search, you're already in the system. You have to accept that. You really do. And I think once more people understand the how similar the situations are with us using Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and like think about Amazon and your purchasing behaviors. All of that is already in US systems. Same thing with whenever you're clicking on Facebook ads, whenever you're watching YouTube and your YouTube ads come up. You guys might see my YouTube ads. It's all for AI. Literally everything's AI. If I don't get an AI ad, I watch it because I'm like, wow, what do people think I like? But we really have to drop this idea that Canadians have to have all their data in Canada. It has to be run by Canadian systems. We don't have Google in this country. We don't have a Microsoft. We need to start thinking cross-border data handling in a safe and encrypted way. And we have to stop latching onto these ideas of and feelings of safety and security through sovereignty. Sovereignty is rooted and derived in like royalty and the Queen and territorialism. You guys are going to quickly learn and find out that U.S. companies who have the power and infrastructure and resources to build data centers, they're encroaching on Canadian land, literally. Like they're literally buying land and building data centers and then housing Canadian data. That's like digital territorialism at a national scale that we can't prevent. We don't have the infrastructure. We have to let the U.S. build it for us. Let's listen.
To help hit these goals. And there's also the reality that Canada can't do all of this on its own. There has to be likely in a lot of cases some foreign company involvement, right? Canada can't wall itself off from the rest of the world entirely. So it's a bit of a tricky balance.
Pippa, what kind of information are we referring to? Like, is it my personal information or more sensitive information that maybe governments or, say, hospitals have?
It could easily be either or both. In terms of what the government of Canada is considering building when it talks about this sovereign cloud. It could encompass basically anything held by a government institution. So whether that's your own personal data or like internal government data, we don't really know yet how far-reaching the government will end up making this or want it to be. But some government departments that have come up in my discussions with experts about the topic that this might make sense to apply to would be things like healthcare or the military, for example.
Okay.
And I agree with that. Like, I mean, we're going to have a serious issue with the healthcare, the tech side of healthcare acclimating to a sovereign infrastructure, or basically your healthcare data. If your healthcare data needs to stay in Canada, it can't go through any Microsoft, Google, or Amazon systems. And I can tell you right now, most of the tech providers in Canada that we work with, we literally work with tech providers specific for healthcare in Canada. And they use US systems. They use Google, Microsoft, Amazon Web Systems, RIP AWS the last couple of days. But to the idea that Canada is going to magically come up with an Amazon Web Systems or Google Cloud infrastructure just because we have data centers. Come on, guys. We're well past this stuff. If we're still moaning about sovereignty, like in the next 5 years, unless everyone's closing their Facebook and Instagram accounts, we are crying foul in an area where we should just be yielding. Like, we should just yield to the greater powers. Say, hey, Google, Microsoft, thank you for building these trillion-dollar infrastructures. You guys are safe. You guys know what you're doing because you've been doing it for years and you're already well entrenched in our country. Continue to do it for us, please, safely. Thank you. At least that's my perspective as a tech person. Being in tech 15 years, watching nothing happening in Canada and the rest happening in the rest of the world. And then finally, Canadians waking up to this. It's refreshing. It's bittersweet, but it's refreshing.
Okay. Pippa, let's talk about what full sovereignty would look like for one of these companies. How many pieces are involved?
Yeah, so there's a few layers that I feel like a company would need to think about when they think about how sovereign they are. So, for example, there's like the physical location of a company's data center, for example, like where is that center located? Then there's the company's ownership and employees. Where are they located? And then the same question applies to a company's customers or like the data center's users. Where are they located? Are they in the same country or the same region as the data center, or are they kind of also located elsewhere? And then there's the actual hardware, like the chips that we've mentioned. Where are those made? Who are they made by? Are they made in the same country, or are they being brought in from elsewhere? And then are all of these things something that matter at the end of the day when it comes to sovereignty?
Nope.
So there's a bunch of different layers for a company and also the government to consider when it kind of is shaping its definition of a sovereign company.
So for a company to be sovereign, they'd have to hit all of these things?
I mean, I think that's kind of what the government is still trying to figure out.
Okay, Joe, why is sovereignty important?
Well, okay, so this sovereignty discussion, it's kind of ebbed and flowed. It picked.
You're going to hear this journalist try and justify sovereignty in its requirement or imperative for Canadians, but then at the same time point out the fact that our window for sovereignty is already closed, and that Canadians only started caring once they thought their data was being sent to AI. It's so funny to watch the disconnect, because all these super systems, Facebook, Google, Twitter, they already have their own AIs. Like, it's building on top of the infrastructure they already have. A lot of their models are being trained by data that's already in their systems, given to them by Canadians. It's supremely ironic that we would be crying foul now for sovereignty, when in reality we gave up our sovereignty decades ago. It's, as a tech person in Canada, one of the few tech people in Canada, I gotta say, guys, we're really out to lunch on this stuff. We gotta start paying attention, learning now.
Up last year in terms of AI, because to build an AI model, to use AI applications, you need a lot of this physical infrastructure, right? You need the data centers and the chips. And there wasn't enough of this infrastructure. The demand to use it was incredibly high. The supply was not there. And countries began thinking, well, like we need this stuff in our own countries so that we can provide these services to companies here so that, they can capitalize on AI. So in the AI context, sovereignty really emerged there, like talking about building sovereign infrastructure in Canada for AI. And the government announced a program on this last year. So that was about just like having the physical data centers in your country. What's happened this year is the conversation has really evolved because of Donald Trump.
And that trade war, of course.
Yeah, and also some of the legislation in the US that basically would compel or can compel a US company such as Microsoft or Google or Amazon to comply with a law enforcement request for data held by their facilities, even if that data is in a data center in Canada. And the customer, the owner of that data might not even be notified that this process is going on.
That's happening literally every second. So your data is being, and Jesus Christ, it's like explaining, it's like explaining how to drink water to a child. It should be obvious. Your data, as soon as you enter things into systems, or as soon as you start interacting with US systems, Google, for example, you go to Google, your data attached to your IP, your phone, your computer, as soon as you log into something, your emails and attached to that IP, they can see your email profile across Facebook, Microsoft. They start to get a footprint of your being. Like my footprint online is this raging AI stock, crypto, like all my whole world, all I see is stocks, crypto, and AI. Like literally, that's all I see. So the machines that be, they know, hey, let's just keep sending this guy this stuff because we know he's going to engage with it. Great. I click, I see ads. I click, I see ads. Great. The only way that they're able to do that, it's called contextualization, and like for targeting for content and ads. The only way they're able to do that is if you've already given them something. And once you've given them something, your data and your footprint is ripping through systems at warp speed with no notification to you. You're not getting a notification on your phone saying, hey, Amazon has your data now. Hey, Microsoft has your data now. Hey, Google has your data now. There's nothing like that out there. So for us to think that we're going to go from where we're at now, where we are literal digital stains on the sidewalk of a lot of this US infrastructure, to having our own Microsoft, our own Google, our own Amazon, our own OpenAI. Shout out to Co here. I think you guys are doing a great job. If anyone from your team wants to jump in a discovery call with our team to see what we can do, 100%. But unless we have these mega systems already established and already in place, plus billion-dollar data centers to house this data, we don't have sovereignty. We have to use other systems. And I'm going to keep saying this over and over until I've been telling my clients and our prospects this for years, 2-3 years. We sit down, we talk to healthcare providers like, oh, we need our data in Canada. Says what? They say, well, it's the law. I'm like, show me where that says that in the law. And then they try to bring up the languaging for it. It says, well, if you can't store your data in Canada, use the best protection and security possible to do so. So it's not even a requirement. And when it's not a requirement, they're asking you to use your own judgment for securitization and confidentiality. Like it's a joke. We have 25-year-old data laws in this country. And if that's not a strong indication of how far behind our technological infrastructure is in Canada, then you are completely out to lunch. And you should just close up your Facebook and Instagram accounts because this is not for you. If you are interacting with these mega systems, you are already part of the machine. Digital sovereignty is unavailable. The only opportunity we would have for digital sovereignty is if we went all in on an AI infrastructure today for the next 15 years. And still at that point, China, US, Europe, they're going to be 15 years with their momentum ahead. Our window for this opportunity of sovereignty, I believe, is closed. We have to take into consideration the guys who already know how to do it really well, Microsoft, Amazon's, Google's, OpenAI's, and work with them. work with the superpowers. Don't try and isolate ourselves from the literal global economy that's happening right now. I feel like Canada's like, guys, we're so scared. Like, let's just isolate ourselves and close ourselves off to any opportunities and watch our real estate market collapse. Are you guys okay?
So people now are arguing, well, that's a risk if you're talking about sensitive data. Like, is it really secure to have it in a data center operated by an American company? And that argument might have some merit. Some people argue it's kind of overblown and a bit delving into fear-mongering. But, lots of weird things are happening under Trump. Like, we're seeing how he can bend institutions and companies to his will.
So just so I'm clear, then, it's like the issue here is that the U.S. law would supersede Canadian law here.
That's the concern, yes. And this came up in Europe recently, actually, in France. There was a Senate committee there that was really grilling this Microsoft executive on this issue. And, they were asking him, like, can you guarantee under oath that, our data would never be transferred to the U.S. by a court order without the consent of French authorities? And the Microsoft executive said, well, no, I can't guarantee that. And so a lot of people have taken that to mean that, like, this is an acknowledgement that for Microsoft, U.S. law, does supersede, another country's law. That's the concern. Also, if you look at what the government is saying in terms of its sovereign cloud proposal, they want to hear from companies that A, are not subject to foreign laws over data, but B, not subject to foreign laws where a government could lean on them to discontinue or interrupt services.
Okay.
So right there, we're asking if there's any international partners, potential partners, that are not subject to their own domestic laws. Are we literally living in the Wizard of Oz right now? We're looking for companies that are not subject to the laws of their own nations. It doesn't make sense, guys. We are using every ounce of strength for the mental gymnastics in order to justify digital sovereignty when we need to start justifying partnering with superpowers and not being completely left behind economically as a nation. That's really what and if you're someone who says, well, Canada should have our own stuff and Canada should be sovereign and we should have our own Google and Microsoft. Where were you 30 years ago? Where were you 20 years ago? Where were you like at the beginning of the pandemic when we really needed to have a digital infrastructure? It's really only the conversation of the day because of AI and how fast digital is moving with AI. That, oh, now Canadians want to think of sovereignty. Well, you should have been thinking about that 20 years ago. When Facebook came out, were you thinking about that? Or were you just logging in and putting your entire life onto your Facebook account? If you share anything on Facebook or Instagram about your life, and you're thinking to yourself, you're safe, you should have no part of the conversation on digital sovereignty at all, because you've already given that up. The only reason I'm part of the conversation is because I'm trying to get us away from this lofty idea of sovereignty and having an isolated digital infrastructure, which is going to be impossible. Microsoft, Google, and Amazon are significantly entrenched in this country. It's like we're politically trying to come up with an impossible dream just so that we can make people feel more comfortable. I guarantee you, when Evan Solomon and company come out with their refreshed position on digital legislature and regulation for data, it's going to be completely cross-border. It's going to be completely internationally supported. We're not going to say, oh, no, we're not going to use Microsoft and Google and just stop. That'd be absolutely insane. Most of the systems in this country would go down. So we have to work with superpowers, guys. It's too late for us to do it on our own.
So, to take an extreme example, like telling Microsoft, hey, cut off cloud services to Canada, right? That is also a risk that is on people's minds. I'm not sure how realistic that is, but these are the kinds of things that are under discussion.
Okay, interesting. Pippa, what is the government doing to get us to this digital sovereignty?
they've just concluded a period of information gathering. So they put out what's called a request for information, or an RFI. It's kind of what comes before like a request for proposals, which is when you actually ask for companies to kind of bid on something. But this is basically just a period during which stakeholders, mostly companies, have a chance to give the government feedback on basically like what they should go shopping for when they're ready to buy. So in their initial request for information, they described looking for a, quote, fully sovereign public cloud solution and establishing a Canadian sovereign procurement stream for digital services. So those were kind of some of the terms that they put out there. Whether or not that includes American or multinational companies is still kind of yet to be determined, it seems. They took the liberty of defining Canadian owned and controlled vendors in their RFI. Like they kind of put out a definition of what that was and what they were looking for. But they still invited non-Canadian companies to provide feedback and like take part in the information gathering process. To be precise, it said that it was, quote, open to understanding how vendors manage foreign components and maintain sovereignty through operational controls. So they're really just trying to see what's out there.
Yeah.
And that closed at
So this is a Canadian government, national level lawmakers here, like the top of the top. They're going to the market to try and figure out, hey guys, how can we be sovereign? We don't know what to do. We just don't understand what to do. Can we get help from the private marketplace? Private market turns around and says, yeah, no problem. We're an American company, but we can help you guys get sovereign, no problem. It's completely backwards, guys. And the definition of what a Canadian company is, it's like, are you, did you start your company in Canada, or are there Canadians working for it? Like we're gonna have a hard time in this avenue. My only hope is I don't want it to hold up adoption in Canada because we're trying to figure out sovereignty when most Canadians don't understand what sovereignty is. They just hear government saying, yes, we're going to be sovereign. Oh, by the way, your data is going to have to be sent over the border to get processed. Like it's just a mess we need clarity. We need understanding, and we need a conversation that Canadians can digest and make a decision on, not trying to come up with a definition of sovereignty and then having the government try and have foreign entities define what sovereignty is through how they control data, and when their data is being moved over the border for processing in certain parts of the data stream, how do you make sure it's still sovereign? Like that, it's a joke, guys. We need to do better. I'm getting pulled away by work. Hopefully we can finish this shortly.
The end of September. So I think they're now kind of at the point where they're going back, discussing what they've learned, what's realistic, before returning with a request for proposals, you would assume.
So a lot of proposals out there. But, Joe, you said that the big players here are the U.S. companies. And it makes me think, are we behind in Canada? Like, shouldn't we have been thinking about this way before now?
Arguably, yes. I mean, it usually takes some kind of external shock, for people to wake up about.
So right there, shouldn't we have been thinking about this a long time ago? The answer is yes. And immediately the guy from the Globe and Mail says, well, it usually takes an external shock for people to start waking up. Congrats, guys. You're waking up now. If you're seeing my face on YouTube, congrats. You're being woken up to the fact that our data is being shared with Americans for the past 20, 30 years. She's right. It's too late. We cannot achieve full sovereignty, guys. We have to leverage these super systems. So, and it's just so... For me, it's really disappointing because when you're in tech for this long, especially in Canada, 15 years, and you're saying the same thing over and over and over and over, and the Canadians are just not listening, and then we have Canadian media starting to say what you say. We have the Canadian government starting to say what you say. It just takes Canadians so long for it to click. Like, hey, wake up. You've been looking at your real estate portfolio for far too long. You got to pay attention to some technology now.
This issue, because it is kind of a nebulous topic, and it, companies like Microsoft and Amazon and Google, like they've been in Canada for a while offering these services without too much controversy. So like people didn't have a reason to consider this seriously before. So people didn't have a reason to take this seriously before. Now they do because of AI. It's all feelings. This is completely feeling driven by the fragility of Canadians who are waking up. It's like, oh my God, AI, my data? Oh no. Meanwhile, Facebook and Google know all about you. Yeah, like it comes in waves. Like when the US passed the Patriot Act after 9/11, like there was a data sovereignty discussion then, but it kind of died off.
I forgot about it
a little bit. Yeah. Yeah. And I think Europe has been a bit ahead of Canada on this. But yeah, arguably, sure, could have happened sooner, but it is happening now.
So AI Minister Evan Solomon has said we may need to rely on foreign companies for help to make Canada's digital space more sovereign. Pippi talked a little bit about this. And OpenAI recently offered to help us build this sovereign infrastructure. And just last week, the United Arab Emirates signed a deal with Canada to collaborate on AI and data infrastructure. So help me understand, like, how can we build sovereign infrastructure with foreign involvement?
Yeah, that's where it gets confusing. So Evan Solomon has this, it's a bit of a catchphrase. He says it a lot in speeches, and it's almost like a Zen koan because it's like contradictory. But sovereignty does not mean solitude. Okay. There's just certain aspects of this that Canada cannot do. We don't have the Canadian companies. Like we don't have an Nvidia here. The whole AI industry depends on Nvidia for the GPUs, graphics processing units, which are the chips that power AI models. They're tailored for AI essentially, and they're in incredible demand. Nvidia is an incredibly valuable company
based in the US.
Based in the US. So we need those chips, right?
So even like the root, the bloodline of AI and data processing, the chips coming from NVIDIA, like do we really believe we're going to have an NVIDIA come up in Canada and start producing these chips at scale? No, we're going to have to pay NVIDIA for them. And you guys are going to quickly learn the chips are the key to this whole equation. Like the United States quite literally just stopped shipping chips to China, or at least they're trying to take some profit for any chips that go to China. NVIDIA is like, okay, well, we don't want to lose our market, so we'll pay a fee to sell there. I think they actually might have just stopped. I'm not 100% sure. They're going to clarify that. But Trump is going as far as saying, hey, NVIDIA, you got to sell to American companies first before you even consider any international partners. So we want America to be as strong when it comes to processing as possible. We want all the chips for all the American companies, all the American data centers first. Why? Because the world is quickly learning that these data centers are like, if you play like any sort of war game like StarCraft or Warcraft or anything like that, when you put down a base or a pylon, I remember these games. I really enjoyed StarCraft back in the day. But whenever you put down a base on your field, on your map, the base would sort of do something in its proximity, or your units could go work in it. That's what the States is doing with data centers. They're just popping those things down and soaking up data from the surrounding area or the country that the data center is in, and they're slowly building a data profile at a national level for all the different data centers that they have. And it's a very powerful and new way that I personally believe that countries are going to be like territorial with these data centers. So it's important to pay attention. Hey, who's putting up a data center in your area? What company do they belong to? And how big is it going to be? What sort of data is going to be stored there? Obviously, Canadians, like, what Canadians going to give a shit about a data center? And most Canadians are trying to figure out how to pay their mortgage, let alone talking about a data center. But if you're curious as to what this conversation is on AI, data, Canadian sovereignty, like, we don't have it. We literally don't have sovereignty in this country because we spent too much time doing other things. We don't have a tech industry here. We have houses. We have mortgages.
And chips have become really political, in fact. Like, you've seen how the Trump administration is now taking a percentage of NVIDIA's sales to China. The government took a stake in Intel, right? These are things that are not typically what you would think a Republican government would do. This is more like state-run capitalism. And there's a legislation underway in the US now about prioritizing sales of GPUs to American companies over exports. Now, that seems to be directed at China for competitive security reasons, but you could see, well, maybe they target other countries for some other reason. So Canada has to keep that relationship there, for one thing. And also, like, the cost of building these facilities is really high. You're likely going to have to turn to foreign sources of capital to get it done.
We'll be right back. Pippa, we've been talking a lot about security issues, but there's also opportunity here for Canada. So what are the economic implications of this digital sovereignty?
They could be pretty sizable. So just to kind of give you a sense, for example, as of January this year, about 60% of Canada's cloud market, which includes the federal government, was controlled by about 5 American companies. So
we're going to listen to that again because I was getting distracted here, but I want you guys to take that in.
Was kind of Canada's sizable. So
of this digital sovereignty.
They could be pretty sizable. So just to kind of give you a sense, for example, as of January this year, about 60% of Canada's cloud market, which includes the federal government, was controlled by about 5 American companies.
So 60% of our cloud market here in Canada is controlled by 5 American companies. So 5 American companies own the majority of the cloud market in Canada already. Let's just use that as a starting block.
So between 2021 and 2022, the government of Canada spent nearly $300 million on contracts with Microsoft Canada, for example. The same year, it spent about $515 million on contracts with IBM Canada, which is another like digital services company. So that's only a couple of companies, but it kind of gives you an idea of like just how much of the market there is. And if we were able to diversify away from our dependence on those big U.S. companies, which is kind of up to debate as to how much we should or can, but kind of gives you a sense of just how big those contracts could be. And then on top of that, if we were able to strengthen this sector at home or perhaps open more of these centers or have more opportunity here, there's, a number of jobs that could be created as well for Canadians who might, graduate with skills that are applicable to this sector and then maybe look to the U.S. or some of those U.S. companies for a place to go.
With that in mind, Joe, are there Canadian companies that are stepping forward to rise to this digital sovereignty challenge?
Yeah. So Bell and Telus, notably, the telecommunications companies, are really jumping on this in terms of AI. So Bell has plans for 6 AI data centers over the next few years, and it calls this its sovereign AI fabric. Telus already converted one of its data centers to handle AI and has plans to do so for another one. And so it calls these things its sovereign AI factories. They're just
very great names.
They're just data centers, really, when it comes down to it. But yeah, their argument is that like we're Canadian. These facilities are in Canada. We control them. That is sovereign. They're approaching it slightly differently in terms of how they operate these things. I think they would both argue that one is more sovereign than the other in a way. There's definitely a competition among some companies in the space to be like the most sovereign. So they're there. And recently there was basically like a coalition of Canadian companies that came out and said, we can provide like the first end-to-end sovereign AI government cloud.
What does that even mean?
Well, it means that these Canadian companies control different aspects of this. So you have a company that like builds the physical building and secures the power for it. There's another company that assembles some of the equipment that goes inside the data center. There's 2 other companies that work at like the software cloud level. So there's a lot of Canadian ownership and control.
The most sovereign of sovereign.
The ultimate in sovereignty.
So I want you guys to listen to what they like. They're laughing right now. The most sovereign of sovereign, the ultimate sovereign. Like we're literally treating this like it's a joke, and it's not funny. To me, it is a joke. Like our sovereignty digitally is a joke, and I'm probably gonna have some sort of language up there for the title that says Canadian digital sovereignty is a joke. That's not funny, something like that. Because for me to think like our population is screaming like, oh, now I want data sovereignty, now I want data protection. Why didn't you want that 20 or 30 years ago? Why didn't you want that when Facebook came out? Why didn't you want that when Microsoft started getting you a Microsoft Office suite and you were putting all your information through Outlook? Where was it all then? But now that data is being leveraged by AI and AI can sort of talk back to me, oh, I don't know what that means, so I'm just going to be afraid. That's what the average Canadian's thinking. We wake up every day and we think, what can I be afraid of today? And the new flavor of the day is AI. How do we get more afraid of it? Well, we know that our data is not sovereign. So let's learn about data centers. Oh, the data centers don't belong to us. So neither does our data at this point, and our data can be taken away from uh, the data center and sent to this other company that can do this and that and sell us ads. Oh, I'm afraid now. But you should have. But most of the time, Canadians were too ignorant to even be afraid because they had no idea that their entire digital lives were already given away. So it's funny to me because the more I feel like Canadians are becoming aware and familiar with the technological landscape in Canada, the more I feel like, okay, yeah, now they are getting afraid because they're realizing how little we have in terms of infrastructure and how much they've given away in terms of their data. It's very interesting for me to watch. It's a rude awakening for Canadians. Like you're out to lunch.
Is the argument.
Yes.
So they are clearly going for that government business.
How are American companies reacting to this?
So it's interesting. So like Microsoft, like we said before, makes arguments about data being at risk. They would argue, well, that's not entirely sound. That's not how things work. Google is offering what they call sovereign cloud solutions as well. And so the way that they're approaching that is through different technical and operational measures to protect data. So one thing they do, or they say is, well, like data can be encrypted. And we give the customer in Canada the key to decrypt that data. So we can't provide any useful information to government because like we don't have the encryption key. So they're arguing like that's a mechanism to protect data. If you're concerned about that, how that argument lands ultimately, we'll see. The American companies are in a bit of a awkward situation because again, like they have been here for a while and now they're kind of viewed with suspicion because of factors beyond their control.
Literally, what he just said is 100% true. Microsoft's been here, Google's been here, Amazon's been here for decades. And now it's only because Canadians are looking at AI and not understanding how it works and starting to get this idea that data might be important. Now we're looking at those big players, monster players who are literally responsible for us advancing technologically. We're looking at them with suspicion. It's pathetic to me, guys. Canadians have a pathetic understanding of technology, and we really, really need to change. It's going to have to come. I really believe the government's going to have to institute some sort of curriculum at a young age to get young people familiarized with tech, because this idea that you can just go to school, go to post-secondary, get a job, get a house, like that was told to us, especially my generation, millennials, that was literally told to us day in and day out for our entire lives. But it's so apparent to see now that doesn't work. Kids have 2, 3, 4 degrees. They can't get a job flipping burgers at McDonald's. People who put their life savings into houses or even a condo. I watched this YouTube guy. He says they're called dog crate condos, into these dog crates, only to watch them lose 20, 30% of their equity in like a matter of a couple years. Like how we've been living in this country is a one-track mind, very narrow, and it's led us down this path of irreversible momentum downward, where we can't reach our arms out and grab a tech industry and start making money. We can't slow the bleed on our real estate market for God knows how long it's going to take to recover. Thank God the Blue Jays won Game 7, man, because when you think of anything else going on in Canada, you just get really sad. And I really do believe Canadians are going to have to wake up to this reality, especially young people. You're going to wake up and you're going to realize older people weren't thinking about you. No one was thinking about you. Like, if anything, older people were thinking about themselves even more as time passed. So funny, I saw this stat where it was saying something like the average age of home buyers, like back in the 70s and 80s, was like 26, 30 or whatever. And then you fast forward like into the 2000s, the average age of home owners and buyers and sellers, they're all like 50, 60, 70s, like this. It's the same group of people who won at the beginning of the housing run up who's playing now. There was nothing else that happened in Canada outside of our real estate. Nothing. And so when we turn around as Canadians say, well, how come our data is not safe? Well, it's because we didn't invest anything into a data infrastructure, guys. We really have to wake up to this reality, and we have to acclimate. We have to adapt to it. We have to work with it instead of fight against it. Or we're not going to we're not going to have any sort of economy over the next couple of decades. Real estate's not looking the best, and unless we have a tech boom here, we're not going to be doing anything else. Hope to God the guys working with natural resources can get them out the door.
We talked about this a little bit before, but let's just like hammer down. Like, why don't we have these sovereign tech companies here already?
Well, arguably, we do have them that operate at like different points along the data center supply chain. It's just that they're not at the scale of some of the U.S. companies. Like, it's a very expensive industry. It takes, billions of dollars to build these things. You need a lot of funding. And American companies have just been doing it for much longer, and they have way more resources at their disposal. And they're quite well entrenched and reliable within Canada. If you think about it from a customer point of view, are they going to go with Microsoft, which is very well known and reliable, or are they going to choose an upstart Canadian company that doesn't quite have the track record? So it's a challenge to grow in this industry. And, again, because there hasn't sort of been this external shock where everybody's worried about sovereignty all of a sudden, these Canadian companies haven't had that boost yet.
Yeah. And I would just add, like, if you think about, I mentioned before, like how much money the government of Canada spends on contracts with companies like Microsoft. And just like Joe said, like how entrenched they are because they're good at what they do. It's no secret that government is a slow moving entity. And if you think about like the transformation and the effort that it's going to take to actually detangle some of that integration that we currently have with these companies, like that's no small feat in terms of bureaucracy and making those changes.
So after what you've both laid out, it does sound like a more sovereign digital space can be a good thing, but is it actually possible?
Yeah,
So she has a great question. Sovereignty could be a good thing, but is it actually possible? And at this point in time, we have to assume that no, it is not possible in Canada to achieve sovereignty in a short enough time where it's actual true sovereignty, just because the rest of the world is spending so much money at a speed that we can't keep up with. It's like we're not going to be able to get an order for a whole whack of Nvidia chips to power these data centers because most of the Nvidia chip production has already been claimed by US businesses. So it's not like, it's so funny. It's like it's like a whole group of athletes started a marathon race, and it will say like a 10 mile, 10 kilometer marathon race. So they're running. They're getting to the seventh, eighth mile. Hell, they finished a race. Some of them are finishing. They're getting ready for the next marathon. Maybe it's a 100 mile marathon, 100 kilometer marathon. They're running. They're getting to now the 70th, 80th mile in the marathon. And Canadians were starting the first marathon that was only 10 kilometers, 10 miles. We're literally just starting the baby marathon. Meanwhile, the rest of the world's doing the big boy marathon, running hundreds of kilometers at a time. So, and I'm using kilometers and miles interchangeably here. Obviously, they're very different, but just for the sake of scale, we're starting on baby blocks when we're running against Usain Bolts in the digital space. So we really have to pay attention to that, and we have to start accepting that it's too late for us here. We went over the top with all of our other industries, namely just one. Like the amount of times I hear Americans talking about how most of Canada's economy is built off of real estate and that it's extremely fragile. I've been hearing it for years. Like they're starting to cover us on YouTube. I'm seeing American real estate people cover Canadian the housing crisis. It's like, why is this such a poignant topic of conversation? It's because that's all we do here. And because it's crumbling now, We can't turn around and say, okay, well, I'm going to diversify. I'm going to get some of my assets into tech, or I'm going to invest into some tech companies. What companies? It's like I get better value out of my money by investing in the U.S. stock market than I do like just even having Canadian dollars. I don't hold Canadian dollars at all. I borrow Canadian dollars, and then I make sure that we get USD from all of our international clients, Canadian clients, because I do not believe that the Canadian dollar is going to be able to hold its weight as the rest of the world races ahead with technology while we sit here worrying about sovereignty. I don't. I truly believe we're being cut loose, and that unless we start to really pay attention and play with the big boys, so we can have the big toys, it's not going to work.
I mean, to an extent, right? Like, I think as we've kind of been discussing sovereignty, it's not either or, it's a bit of a scale. So for sure, I think there are ways for the government to support Canadian companies here in building more sovereign infrastructure. To me, it's a question of like, when you talk about the government's sovereign cloud that it wants to build, like how big does it want to go? How much money does it want to spend? And for what specific services and data? Like there are certain kinds of data that, relate to the military, defense, national security, where it arguably is worth the expense and the effort to build a sovereign cloud. It might not make sense to apply those standards to every form of data.
Yeah, what Joe said rings true. When I spoke to Professor Heidi Tork for our story, she described sovereignty as like a dimmer rather than a light switch. So there's layers to it, both on like the company side and the government side of just how sovereign can be, or just how sovereign needs to be in terms of like actually having this come to fruition and how realistic this is.
Are you guys listening to this shit? This is me again. This is pathetic. How sovereign can sovereign be? Like we're stretching the fabrics of our minds to try and justify this stuff at this point, guys. And I think in Canada we're especially good at wasting time talking about bullshit and watching everyone else sit down and do work, complete tasks, and get on with advancing society. We like to sit here and cry and talk about it. But as an agency owner, I have to myself be kept apprised of data regulation compliance, because that's a big part of our offering is we're going to keep you compliant. Canada compliance is really easy with the current laws. As soon as you use U.S. systems with SOC 2, GDPR, AES 256, and TLS 1.2, you're compliant. In the States, however, you have extremely high requirements and thresholds to meet in order to be compliant. So we just follow their lead because they know what's going on. They've been doing this for 30 years now. In Canada, we're just getting started. It's going to take about 10, 15 years to catch up to where the States is at 10 years ago. So I really hope and believe that Canadians are going to start to wake up and say, hey, you know what? Facebook's got me. Instagram's got me. Take my money. Let's get some AI robots going.
So yeah, I think deciding kind of what we need to prioritize in terms of actually making this happen, what types of data, what departments, that's all going to come down to how feasible this actually is.
Well, Joe, Pippa, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Oh, that was a hard listen. Listening to journalists is so hard, and then listening to them talk or speak with talking heads that don't know what they're talking about. It's like a real drag for me. I really like listening to people who are doing stuff talk, because they usually know what's going on in the trench, and that's where the magic happens. So you can see Globe and Mail. The Globe and Mail has 245,000 subscribers, guys, and this topic of conversation got 500 views. Pathetic. I mean, they've got a day, but and if they only have 10 likes, like no one wants to hear about this stuff. No one cares. And that's the big problem. The most of the time, the people who are caring, it's like the decision makers, the 170, 80-year-old who has to worry about data for their municipality, the city council or what have you. Most of the city doesn't even know what a data center is. So for me to see this conversation hold up and slow down adoption of AI and just technology in general in Canada, it's really sad. And I really do feel like we are paying the price for being afraid. We are paying a price for not taking the risk and investing into tech 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, hell, today. It's just that we're basically paying the price for being fragile and soft in Canada, and we are going to have to play. We're going to have to play the same game the U.S. is playing, Europe is playing. We're going to have to play their game if we want to maintain some sort of a semblance of strength. Because if we try to do it on our own, it's just not going to happen. Like you're hearing the reporters going, "Well, how feasible is this? We need hundreds of billions of dollars, guys. We can't even manage that at a national level." Like it's so obvious. Let's read some of the comments. Like when you see a video get 10 likes and 8 comments, that ratio, that's pretty bad. You want to see a lot of likes and a fraction of that is comments. When you see a few likes and an equal amount of comments, it's pretty bad. You know how I know that? Because we got videos like that. So let's take a look at some comments for the Globe and Mail on their podcast for digital sovereignty and AI. First person, let's call a spade a spade. Thought control sovereignty. Shows or elbows up is a joke. Was used to convince the boomers that Carney would save Canada from Trump. And I 100% agree. Like this is all just for boomer comfort. What Canada needs to be is saved from his liberal ideologies. That's funny. This is also about our laws. We gave up our digital rights law already. What is replacing it, if anything? This is true. The government spied on 33 million devices, constantly pushing internet censorship, frozen bank accounts. We don't have digital sovereignty or security in Canada. 100% true. Canada doesn't need AI. Nobody does. That is incorrect. And this is funny. Like when I read this comment the first time, so this person, Clinton Allen Anderson, they say Canada doesn't need AI. No one does. Right away, someone's like, great insight, Clinton. Really profound. So they start attacking that guy right off the bat. The next person says, "Wow, your comment past also suggests no one needs oil. Is this erudite Globe and Mail readership I've heard so much about?" So you have people attacking the readers of Globe and Mail, and this person seems to be a little bit out in the weeds when it comes to AI, saying that Canada doesn't need it. We need it like right now. We need it like an emergency surgery. But I'm going to try my best to bring more conversations of this nature to Canadians through our little YouTube channel. Like when we got 100 subscribers, it was great. We started to think, maybe some Canadians are really starting to pay attention to this stuff. And now we're starting to trickle past that. I think we're up to like 110, 120. But if you like this type of conversation or you like the commentary on it, like and subscribe. I'm going to try and do more videos, more fun videos. Of course, this is like really dry technical crap. No one likes this stuff. But if you don't like what I'm talking about, you don't like me, you don't like my face, leave us a comment, dislike, what have you. All the engagement really matters for bringing the conversation to the service for Canadians, our visibility for our agency as well. I'm going to keep this one just under an hour. It was a little bit longer than the usual ones, but I really appreciate if you made it this far. And I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how much Canada can transform its sovereignty, or more so just secured and confidential digital infrastructure over the next 5-10 years. We're gonna have to do it like hopefully in the next 2 years, but Godspeed, Canada. Let's try and figure this out together. Bye now.